Hey everyone, Trevor here at the Darkroom. So if you've been following us for a while, you know that most of the 35mm content that we share is created and taken with Nikon film cameras, specifically older manual focus SLRs, and that's because they are my favorite cameras. I just enjoy shooting with them more than any other system at the moment. Like the Nikon F3, or my favorite camera, the Nikon FM3. But here's the thing, both of these cameras are not cheap, especially the FM3, and we're always trying to give cheaper alternatives for you all in the film community, so you have a lot of great options depending on what your budget is. So if you're looking to get into Nikon for cheap, there are some cheaper alternatives when it comes to their manual focus cameras, like the Nikon FM. That's the one I recommend most. I really like that camera. It's very reliable. Or the FE is very good. The FG is not bad. And then there's also the FM10, which is a newer Nikon branded camera that they didn't make, but it's based on the FM. And it's a very good mechanical camera if you find one that's in good working condition. So another F-mount Nikon system that's been on my radar are the Nikkormat or Nikkormats. I don't know which is the right pronunciation. They might both be wrong, and just let me know in the comments below. But either way, I got to try a Nikkormat EM many years ago, but it wasn't working properly, so I didn't have the best experience with it. And I hadn't really had the opportunity to try another one until I saw this Nikkormat FTN in a local camera shop, and I picked it up for 50 bucks. And to be honest with you, I didn't really have high expectations for this camera. I just mainly wanted to pick it up to see if it would be a decent option for those of you who are interested in getting into Nikons but don't want to drop a lot of money. And when I first posted about this camera, I was really surprised at all of the comments that I got. Over all of the years, I've never had a post about a single camera that I got more comments of people saying like, that was my first ever film camera and I still have it, or that was my grandpa's camera or my dad's camera and they handed it down to me and I still have it and it still works perfectly. And that's saying a lot because these cameras are pretty old. This specific camera is from 1967. It's the first year that the FTN came out, and it ran for about 10 years, I believe. And there are two models after it, the FT2 and the FT3. So while shooting my first roll through this camera, I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed shooting with it. It has a great shutter feel and advance. And it's well built, it's heavy, it's a brass camera, and it just feels really good in your hands. And I also like how clean it is on the top, and that's because this camera is really unique and it has its shutter right here. So the shutter speeds are right here, right on the camera. Your ISO is right here, and then obviously your aperture is right there. So everything is on the lens basically, and then your depth of field preview is there. You have a giant frame counter, there's your shutter, and then your advance right here. And then on top of it, this camera has a built-in light meter, and not only does it have the light meter in the prism, but it also has the light meter right here. So you can shoot waist level and see your meter here while you're shooting, or if you have it on a tripod, you can double check your meter reading right there. The shooting experience is just one thing though. Obviously I need to get good results for me to enjoy shooting with this camera and wanting to continue to shoot with it. And that has a lot to do with the camera itself. You know, the meter needs to be working properly, the advance needs to be working properly so frames aren't overlapping, and most of all, older cameras like this need to make sure that the shutter and the shutter curtain are working properly, because sometimes older cameras, especially mechanical cameras, can have a shutter that is lagging and you need to get it fixed. But when I got the results back from my first roll of Delta 400, I was really happy with the results. And when I go to take photos, I find myself, surprisingly, grabbing this camera over my Nikon FM3A, which is my favorite camera and probably always will be. But it says a lot that I want to grab this camera. It's really fun to shoot with this camera, and it actually is a lot like a Nikon F. And that's because, well, this is a Nikon camera. It was made by Nikon, and this camera came out at the tail end of the Nikon F. It has a very similar build quality. It's solid brass. It's similar in height. It's actually a little bit shorter than the F. It doesn't have a removable prism, but that's not a big deal for me because this prism is not that large at all. It's actually right around the size of the standard prism. and it has a built-in light meter, which the standard Prism does not have. The other thing compared to the Nikon F is that it has a swinging open door like this. Compared to the Nikon F, you have to slide the whole back off. And on top of that, this camera is significantly cheaper than a Nikon F. It's also significantly cheaper than the F2. The F2 came out on the tail end of it. And while the F2 is technically a better camera on paper than this camera can still perform just as well and pretty much do everything that the F2 does. It still shoots with the same lenses. For how affordable this camera is, there are a lot of pros. You know, it's an F mount, it has a meter, it's a mechanical camera, it's well built. And the only cons that I can really think of is two. One, the battery. It takes a mercury battery, which are no longer made. But I've been using a zinc air battery, and it works pretty well. It doesn't last as long as a normal battery, but that's also not that big of a deal because this is a mechanical camera. So if the battery dies, or if you don't even want to use the meter, you can manually meter or Sunny 16, use external meter, whatever you want. This will work without batteries. And then the last thing, it's not really a big con, but it's something that I've had to get used to, and that is the meter inside the Prism. Instead of the overexposure or the plus being at the top, which is like most cameras, it's actually at the bottom, and underexposure is at the top. So it's just upside down. That's common with Nikon. Nikon seems to be a bit backwards in a lot of ways because, you know, even the lens mounts backwards compared to most other cameras. And then the other thing that people will say is a con is that the shutter speeds are on the lens right here, and that the ISO is on the lens. But I actually have gotten used to it, and I really don't mind that at all. And I actually like how clean it is on the top, and that's because there's no, you know, shutter speed dial right here. But yeah, if you're looking for a cheap, really good camera that's mechanical, I highly recommend looking at a Nikkormat FT or FTN, or maybe even a FT2 or FT3. I don't know as much about those cameras, but I know that they were the ones that came after this, and they are also very good. But yeah, let me know if you have any experience with Nikkormat cameras, because I would love to hear your recommendations of other models and your thoughts and experience that you've had with the cameras, because I find that a lot of people learn the most from the comments from the people that have experience with the cameras. So be sure to let me know which camera is your favorite and why, and which ones you recommend to people who might want to give a Nikkormat camera a try.